I'm working on a book about unicorns,
Okay.
and after that, I think I'm going to start a book about health.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm boring because I'm reading a book about wine.
I do. I know a fair amount about fine food and drink. This is a white.
Like
Just enough.
the one I'm reading is a pretty big book. It's about like a couple hundred pages. So in about 6
Couple
months, if
hundred
you want to
pages,
borrow
that's a
it,
big book.
if you want to borrow it in 6 months, I'll let you have it when I'm done.
Yeah, that's
Hopefully,
it.
I'll be done by then.
You know, I read Dune in 6 months.
Wow. Well, that's a
I'm
pretty
just
big
kidding.
book.
Yeah, it took me about a year and a half.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it took me a long time. It's a big book. Anyway, enough about that. So today, well, my name is Carrie, and I'm with Tastings Wine Shop, and today I have with me Michael of Marique. And today we are going to kind of go over some really cool wine terms that you can use to make yourself feel like a real wine pro and just become a better taster, essentially. And all of these wines that we have in the lineup are awesome wines to help you do that and help represent those really cool words that we all use in wine terminology. So yeah, Michael.
Yeah, we're going to try to give you tips to sound more like a pro, because we had to learn terms to make us sound like we know what we're talking about. And so might as well kind of share it with you,
Yeah.
share a little bit of knowledge. And we realize that sometimes it can be a little intimidating, especially if you're like around people who know wine a little bit or pretend like they know wine. And at least you'll have terms and you'll know how to hold a glass and how to taste and just have a conversation about wine and maybe have even a few tips on how to sound smart if you don't even know what you're tasting.
Yeah,
So
that's the key.
that's the key, because I
That's
mean I
the
use that
key,
all the
yeah,
time. I'm like,
yeah.
oh yeah, that's definitely that.
It's interesting.
And never underestimate the power of suggestion too.
Yes.
So,
Oh yes.
so we're gonna start with our first wine for the evening,
Ooh.
which is brand new, and I'm so excited. This is a favorite of ours, and it's the Brod Frère Anselme Côte de Provence Rosé. Most of you who come to tastings are familiar with Brod. They're a family-owned winery for 5 generations now in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So they're based in the Rhône. And they also buy fruit from a vineyard in Provence, and they make this lovely rosé. So we've had that for several years. And this last Monday, we finally got the 2019, which I was kind of excited
Awesome,
about.
yeah.
You know, and just to give you like a little bit of background story, I mean, we had to order this wine, like pre-order this wine back in end of December, early January. We had to give quantities, and it finally showed up on Memorial Day. And so, of course, I had to put it in the lineup. I'm like, I want to taste it really bad.
Yeah.
So, we'll talk about, I guess, how to taste or how to like
Hold our
present
glass
the wine,
maybe
how to
first,
hold the
yeah.
glass. So, people, this is called a stemware. It's because it's got a stem, and that stem actually has a use. It makes sure that you don't put your fingers all over the glass. And why don't you want to put your fingers over the glass? Well, I'm going to do a faux pas here. If you do this, it's going to be like very hard to kind of look at the color and kind of observe your wine. Then it's also like, you know, you might want to think that your fingers are clean and you've been washing your hands a ton lately. But when you're eating and you're having wine, chances are you're going to have some kind of film, some kind of residue on your hands, and you're going to just get your glass all smeared. Whether you're clean or not, that's not the issue, but you're going to get some kind of deposit on your glass, and it's just not attractive. The other thing is that if you put your hands on it, eventually you're going to warm up that wine, and temperature is a big thing.
Don't like that, yeah.
No, I mean, you know, if you want a white, I mean, you don't want it too cold, but you don't want it warm either. And same with a red, you know, room temperature is nice, but all of a sudden you put your hands, which are like, you know, pretty warm, and you just warm it up, and that messes it all up. That's very important. Like, temperature is very important. So
Also,
you
it's really
use
good
it
to
by the
laugh.
stem.
You can hold it and laugh like exaggerated, and you look fancy.
And it looks very fancy, and then you can even put your little finger like
Yeah,
that.
sometimes I go like this, and I'm like,
You know,
oh,
and
well,
look really cool. But
the economy.
so the other thing that does is actually allows you to kind of like swirl it a little bit easier. You know, you got like a good base for it. So first thing is how to hold your glass, and we took care of that. Second, so how to properly taste a wine or
Drink.
like look like a pro when you're tasting wine. So the first thing you would want to do is actually kind of observe your wine. Take a look at the color, take a look at the size of the glass. Usually you would put it on the back, on a white background so you can see like the edges. And what that gives you is actually, whether it's a young wine, an older wine, it'll tell you an idea of like what kind of wine you're drinking, whether it's white, rosé, red. If it's a deep color, if it's a lighter color, if you get some kind of break color on the side, very often it's like an older wine because it loses. Red wines, for example, lose color as they get older, to where white wines actually gain color as they get older. So, anecdote, like 1 year I was in France, it was maybe 10 years ago or so, and of course I'm always looking at wine, booze and
Yeah,
wine. And
absolutely.
food
Yeah,
in France.
obviously.
And in this little love box, I saw this bottle of Sauternes, which is like
That's
my
good
favorite.
stuff, yeah.
And it looked like it was red wine.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, now I'm lost. I didn't know that Sauternes came in red. I always heard of like the dessert wine,
Yeah,
the white,
yeah.
sweet.
Yep.
And I looked at what was left of the label. It was a very old bottle, and it was like a very old vintage. And so it actually gains color
Oh,
to
yeah.
where it actually looks like a red.
Wow, that's
So that was kind of
gnarly.
like, I really wanted it, but it was like out of my budget.
Yeah. Oh,
So
that's
it
so
was-
cool. That's a lot of color.
It was a lot of color, so it'll give you an idea of like how old the wine is.
Yep. This, I notice sometimes people look at it like this, and I always know who knows what they're doing because they hold it down.
Yeah,
So,
and like I said, traditionally on a white background, so
Yeah.
you can see the colors. So that's the first thing, kind of observing your wine. Second thing you would do is actually smell it, and you smell it just the way it is. So you would bring it to your nose, and kind of like think at the same time as you kind of breathe.
Yeah.
And try to smell from like the back of your nose, not just the front. Kind of imagine like getting all the way back to the back of your nose.
sometimes it
and-
helps too if I have my mouth open.
Yeah, it could help
Yeah.
you. And I usually close my eyes. It brings back memories. I'm kind of like, oh, that reminds me of.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And think about it. The big thing about wine tasting is coming up with terms that people can actually identify with. And so if you smell this and you're like, oh yeah, in your mind you're like, it smells like some fruit that I know. It smells like maybe some strawberry, some red fruit, but not super ripe, whatever. Just kind of think of that in your mind and try to like inhale it as much as you can. Second step is using that stem, swirling it.
Ooh.
And what that does is actually
And
activates the
separate.
alcohol cells and just kind of brings the aromatics,
Those
just
esters.
those esters, like
The
way up.
esters.
And
So
then
you're
you
saying
do
we
the
swirl.
exact same thing. Just kind of like bring it to your nose. And all of a sudden it should be like very different.
Yeah.
Very different. So like in this case, first time I could get like some kind of not so ripe strawberries, like ripe but not over the top, and I could get like a little bit of lemon.
Yeah, there's some citrus there.
And
yeah.
and now that I swirled it, I get that strawberry again.
Yep.
But I almost get like a little herbal component as well.
Yeah, I
Like a
get.
grassy.
Yep,
like
and
a-
I even get like some like there's even a little salinity there even, but
Yeah,
definitely
but-
herby.
So it definitely kind of just brightens up all these smells, these aromas, and it just helps you identify what you smell, which is really cool. And it's amazing how that kind of works.
Yeah.
And so with the nose, when you smell it, very often, it could be what we say like a very open nose, meaning you get a lot out of it. But sometimes it can be closed, so that's a good term to get. If you smell it and you don't get a whole lot, like, oh, I think that wine's a little closed. And so that's
you
a
sound
good.
real. Yeah, you sound.
Then some
ready.
people are like, oh, well, you're right, And very often, let's say it's an old red wine, it's like maybe 10 years old or something like that. It's been in a bottle for 10 years with a cork, and that wine needs kind of to just breathe a little bit and just kind of open up, which gives the notion of like decanting,
Yep.
which is why
Yep.
you decant, just to bring.
Would you say the word tight sometimes?
Tight, yeah,
This wine
exactly.
is tight.
It's tight. It's closed.
Yeah.
It needs to breathe, and so those are wine terms that you need to know, like open, tight, closed, and sometimes you can use exuberant.
Yes,
you know,
that's a good
This
one.
like jumps out of
Big
the glass.
words.
It's exuberant. It's just
Michael's here for the
very-
big words.
for the big words. Yeah,
You're
I
here
mean,
for the big words.
for the big words.
Yeah.
I read the dictionary this afternoon actually.
Oh wow, you.
Yeah, I got prepared.
And that took you how long?
Well, just went through a few pages, you know.
Okay, yeah,
you know.
quick skim.
And you can also say that it's very expressive. That's
Yeah.
another good term.
Yep.
So
Aromatic.
aromatic, yeah. So this is a really cool rosé, fresh
Very
off the
good.
boat. I mean, this is awesome, and I always love. I love everything that Broad puts out, including that rosé, and it's always been like super good. One of the things that you would do if you're a real pro in the wine world is actually spit.
I've
Think
been
about
wine for once.
yeah, for once it's so delicious. You can really
yeah.
dump it. This is a practice that imagine you're at a big wine tasting and you're gonna drink or you're gonna taste 20, 30, 40 wines. Well, your palate's gonna get tired very fast.
Yeah.
All that alcohol, all those big flavors will get you worn out pretty fast. And so that's the whole thing of spitting, is to kind of preserve your palate as long as you can and also not get drunk at the same time.
And it's totally acceptable. Like, don't.
Totally.
It's so fancy. It's not fancy, sorry, but it's acceptable, and it
So
shows that you're.
when you're at home, you can actually practice on your spitting skills. I'm not a big believer in spitting, and I think you all know that. So I'm gonna drink mine.
Yeah.
I might just dump it a little bit, but I will not spit in front of the
ahead of you.
camera. So good job. Well
I'm
done.
impressed with myself. It's middle of the week.
Mm,
Been a long day.
mm,
Yeah,
That's
so
delicious.
good.
that's awesome.
So good.
Next, we'll go to the Andeluna Torrontés. So Torrontés is the white grape of Argentina.
Mm.
And it's a grape that you don't really find much anywhere else. Andeluna is a winery that's state of the art, using
Aromatic.
yeah. And this is like their Torrontés from the Uco Valley, which is high altitude, it's about 1,300 meters, so roughly like 4,000 feet of elevation. And it's Torrontés to me is always extremely expressive. So that's like a
Yeah.
great example of what an expressive wine
Yeah.
is. It just jumps out of the glass.
It does, yeah. You
It's,
pour it and you smell it before you even do
Exactly.
anything. Tons of stone fruit in this wine.
So bright.
Yeah.
It's just so like it smells of like stone fruits.
Yeah,
it's just
it
like
does.
that
It's
peach,
super
that
sultry.
nectarine, those apricots just kind
Yeah,
of coming
it's
right
so good.
out. And it almost smells like a perfume, like
Yeah,
something
I
you
was
could just.
like a bouquet of flowers
Exactly.
to me, almost like fresh bouquet of
You know,
flowers.
and very often when I smell wines like that, I'm like, I mean, it's too bad I don't wear perfume because I'm in the wine industry. But this is like totally what I would kind of
Yeah,
spritz
oh yeah.
around. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
like
it's
it's so
great.
vibrant. So going back to tasting wine, so we've looked at it, we smelled it, and then you usually take a sip. And when you take that sip, you kind of like absorb a little bit of oxygen as well, and you
Yeah.
swish it in your mouth, and it basically hits all of the sides of your tongue. So the front of your tongue is actually wired to sense the sweetness, the sugar. So that's why usually when you drink a wine, the first thing you get is that like sweetness aspect. And then the side of your tongue is wired to detect acidity.
Yeah.
And that's and acidity, as you heard me say before, is super important in wine, because I'm French and we usually drink wine with food, and that acidity is essential in going with
Cutting a lot of
cutting all of that fattiness
Yeah.
and just kind of getting you ready for that next
Yeah.
bite, you know.
Yeah.
And that acidity, if you ever want to play with it, you'll feel it if your mouth kind of waters. When you take a sip of wine, and you can feel yourself like salivate. It's just like your mouth keeps
Sometimes,
watering.
like literally tingles.
It does,
It's-
yeah.
My tongue will literally a term I like to use is this dances across my tongue. It's very zippy.
Yeah, like zippy and very bright.
Yeah.
That acidity sometimes also comes as a like a minerality kind of effect. Salinity, you mentioned salinity earlier, and acidity. And that acidity, I mean, imagine like sucking on a rock, on a wet rock, or like the smell of like wet cement. Like, you get all that basically in that acidity concept. So you would just take a sip and then kind of absorb a little bit of oxygen, and that kind of warms up the wine and the alcohol, and kind of releases all the aromas, and you just swish in your mouth so that you hit all of the aspects of the tongue. The back of the tongue is where you would usually see or taste all the tannins. So it could be tannins from the fruit, tannin from the oak, But that's why you would get that dryness kind of component. And in case some of you ever wonder what tannin really is, if you can ever find some grapes with seeds instead of seedless, and biting one of those seeds, that's what tannins are.
Yeah.
That's that astringency,
It's like that,
what you
like-
get, that puckery kind of
Yeah.
flavor. You're like, whoa.
Yeah,
what
black
just
tea
happened?
has it a little bit sometimes
Does
too.
a bit, yeah,
yeah.
it does have tannins
Yeah.
actually. So, and you can find tannins in oak as well. So don't be shy about saying, oh yeah, I get a little bit of like oak tannin. It does contain
Yeah,
some.
it's a
so-
thing. It's a thing. This wine is a great wine, I think, to also represent mouthfeel
Mhm.
when you're tasting wine, because this is it has a lot of mouthfeel.
It does. It has a
It has some
certain
weight.
like it's got weight,
Yep.
a certain viscosity
Mhm.
to it, but it also has a nice little acidity to it.
Yeah.
And
It's well-rounded.
and it's not extremely heavy on the finish. I mean,
No.
I would call
It's
it
a
like a
well-rounded
medium
wine.
body.
Yeah.
It's well rounded, and I think that would be great with like Asian food.
Yeah, that I was thinking that a little bit. Yep. Or like those salads with like the mandarin oranges in it.
Yeah, that actually would sound
Oh,
really
that
good.
sounds so
You know, or
yummy.
a little spice, or like those kind of Asian
Yeah.
flavors.
Yum.
And Torrontés, to me, like always, it's so perfumey and so exuberant in the nose. Always kind of reminds me a little bit of Viognier,
Yes.
but almost with like some Sauvignon Blanc
Yeah.
notes. So
Got it nail on the head right here.
if you ever want to branch off like Sauvignon Blanc, you're like, I'm in the mood for something else. I want to just try something different. I think Torrontés is awesome for that.
Yeah.
It's just
I agree.
very, very
Yeah.
fragrant.
It's super cool wine.
And it's a great summer wine, I think, because it really has the flavors of summer.
Yeah, it really
You know,
does. It's
peach
all
and
in one
nectarines,
glass.
and we're just getting there, so it's awesome.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, this weekend's supposed to be like 98. I think,
Yeah,
on
my
Saturday.
phone just told me 92 or something tomorrow.
So, nicely chilled with some fresh fruit and or like some kind of Asian salad.
Yeah,
And
so
you're
good.
set.
That sounds so
So-
good. That's on my menu.
So that's awesome. And then we'll go to the Eberly Syrah. Eberly is a winery in Paso Robles, or Paso Robles, some people say it different ways. It's a winery that started in 1982, and it was started by Gary Eberly. Eberly in German translates into a small wild boar, which is why that's on the front label. And this is their Syrah from the Steinbeck vineyard. It's a single estate Syrah, and that's one of their neighbors. And this wine is always like just a delicious wine. Gary Eberly is actually known as the grandfather or the grandpa of Paso Robles. He was the guy who actually put Paso on the map as its own AVA. So super nice guy. And they've been around since '82, so they've been around for a little bit. Syrah very often can be a little meaty, so you get like some fruit forwardness,
Yeah.
that fruitiness, and that kind of brings up that concept of fruit forward versus kind of earthy.
Uh-huh.
And so when you think of fruit forward, you think more of those kind of like jammy wines, extracted, a little bit more on that juicy and ripe kind of side of things. And then when you think of earthy, you think more of like those mushroom, barnyard. Think of like more rustic.
Yep.
You think of gamey, leathery, tobacco-y, those
Yep.
kinds of things. Those would be like more of the
I
earthy
feel like
tones.
Syrah encompasses both of those.
I think it
things
has a
very
lot of
well.
it.
Yeah.
It does touch on both sides.
Yeah.
To where you get that fruitiness right up front, you get a little bit of that kind of dark plum, dark
Yep.
berries right up front. But then you also get a sort of like meatiness to it.
Yep.
And to me, it's almost like, every time I have Syrah, like a good Syrah, almost brings back the idea of like a bacon fat, but in a
Yeah.
good way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so this is not fatty, there's no fat in this wine, by the way.
Mhm.
And no bacon was heard to make this wine. But it's got that kind of like mouthfeel.
Yeah.
It's got that
It does.
focus. Yeah.
Syrah is my favorite wine to have with lamb,
Yeah,
because it
absolutely.
does have like a meat quality to it, but lamb also pairs so well with like pomegranate and like other like fruity things, and so Syrah just kind of encompasses all of that in those sorts of dishes. This wine is awesome. I love it. It's a great wine. Great one to talk about baking, like spices,
Mhm.
spicy.
Which really is not a term.
Yeah, it's not a thing. We say it though.
And we say it all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll hear it all the time. Spicy, it's a spicy wine. If you're going to use that, try to be a little bit more specific.
Break it down.
Break it down.
What spices?
So what kind of flavors do you really get? You know, whether it's like a pepper, like black pepper, whether it's like cigar blocks or like baking spices or cinnamon or cloves, leather I mentioned.
Yep.
So there's like a whole bunch of different kind of descriptors, actual terms that you can use rather than saying spicy. And that again comes back from like, you know, just really focusing on the wine,
Yep.
smelling and kind of thinking of what it brings back to your memory.
Yep.
You know?
I like to break it down when I smell and taste. I go at it in steps, so I'll think like, okay, I'll start with fruit. What fruit do I get? And then I'll say, okay, earth qualities. What earth qualities am I getting, if any? And then I'll break it down spices. What spices, if any, am I getting? And then I can spit it all out.
You know, and
Figuratively and literally.
sometimes in that spicy kind of descriptor, the general descriptor, I mean, I get other things like licorice, which is like
Yeah.
probably one of my favorite things to
Yes,
find in
I
wine.
love that.
I grew up on licorice, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't care much for
Menthol
milk.
is another like kind of spice that I get sometimes.
Yeah,
Not I
menthol,
would say spice,
eucalyptus,
but like
and
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so. And sometimes, very often, like acidity is also kind of tied to that spiciness. Some
Yeah.
people kind of confuse that a little bit. It's like, you know, it smells spicy, but really it's just that bracing
It's just-
acidity.
yeah.
Just it's like so
yeah.
bright, so
Sometimes
acidic.
alcohol, I think, is mixed up with that too. 'Cause it
Oh,
can
you mean
be
like when it's hot, when the wine is
Yeah,
hot, when it's like
the
super
wine's
high in
hot.
alcohol?
We
and-
got a real hot wine coming up next.
Well, it's when the interesting thing is that it's hot in the sense that it's high in alcohol.
It's high in alcohol, yeah.
But it's not.
No,
showing
it's
it.
integrated. Yeah,
And
integrated.
so-
That word.
So there's
kills
a big
me.
difference. It's very interesting to kind of taste those wines and do that exercise as well. So,
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Because I mean, you know, this one I don't even know what the alcohol is on that. It's 14.2, which really isn't bad for Paso because Paso gets super hot.
Super, yeah,
But this is just like spot on. It's just delicious.
yeah. Paso wines. When I see that, I usually think, okay, it might have a little alcohol.
Delicious is a good term as well. And
Yummy.
one of my favorite is yummy. Yeah.
Yummy.
Yummy in the tummy.
Yummy,
Yeah,
yummy,
that's-
yummy, I
Yeah.
got love in my tummy.
Keep telling
and I'm
it to me.
feeling like I'm loving.
Try it. It's yummy in the tummy.
Just one bite.
So eat your broccoli now.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to touch up on is your glassware. You know, I mean, contrary to popular belief, glassware really has a big importance
Yes.
in tasting wine. You're lucky enough at the tastings they actually use Riedels, which is from Germany, and it's probably like the authority in wine glasses. And I would definitely encourage you, if you have the occasion one of these days, to come to tasting and do the
Super cool.
Riedel tasting, where you try wines in different glasses. You know, this is I think like the all-purpose, something like that.
I think it's the extreme,
Or the extreme.
restaurant or something.
But
yeah.
Riedel kind of did a whole bunch of studies,
There's
so
a
they
ton
have
of
like
science
different
behind it.
different shapes, different volumes, different height, all that. And as you may know, I was in the restaurant business before, and I used to have some really good glassware, you know, that was like from Germany as well. And I did the side-by-side test with Riedel, and I changed all my glassware.
Yeah, I mean they're literal scientists,
And,
y'all.
and I don't work there
They have
anymore.
studies.
I don't think they like that. It was a big budget to blow on glassware, but you know, you gotta be
It's
serious.
a thing. Yeah,
So-
it's a thing.
And Gina from
I
BLJ,
like my Zoltos.
you owe me $50 for the
Yeah.
prize, so there you go. So no,
She
seriously,
doesn't. She never
glassware.
contacts you again.
No, she'll be like, I don't know who you are.
I don't know.
But definitely has like a big impact on how you will taste your wine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So-
Yep. Yep, I agree.
So,
I mean, I drank all mine. Man, what happened to this
Must have been a rough day at the
spinning
office.
versus-
too much
Yeah.
dragon studying or something. I don't know.
Listen, unicorn right now. I'm going for my
Unicorn.
unicorn
I know.
break. While also reading about elves. It's just been a crazy week.
Crazy. So our last wine for the evening is the Gifford Hurlinger Merlot, which is coming from Walla Walla in Washington.
We love Gifford.
Oh,
Yeah.
love them. You know, Mike and his wife Melissa are just awesome. It's a very small winery,
So
husband
small.
and wife.
So I love it.
It's estate. They're super nice. And Mike is actually a Idaho native.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's from Sandpoint originally, and
Oh, I did know that.
yeah.
I did know that.
And I'm sure you have seen him here before, or you might have met him in Walla Walla during one of the tastings and one of the visits of them. super nice little winery, very quaint. I mean, it's not big at all, and it's just the two of them really.
Which is awesome
operating
because
it.
they're always ready for tours.
Yeah, and
It's
it's
not
and he's
actually
like
the
always
door.
he's always so nice, and they produce some super good wines.
Yeah.
That are very well priced for where they're at. You know, it's
Yep.
Walla Walla, it's all estate, it's 100% Merlot, it's all varietal, all their own estate. It is about like 2 years in oak, roughly about half new. And I just can't say how how much I love these guys.
Yeah,
So
I think they
it's
do a
super
great job
awesome.
also expressing.
You know, when we talk
alcohol.
about wine, I mean, there's plenty of wines out there, but then the stories and the people behind them are
That's
just
huge.
so important.
Yeah, that's what draws.
I mean,
a lot of us
I got to
wine.
meet one of the broads. I got to meet Gary Everly once,
Wow, I know
and
here.
he's charming gentleman, huge. He was a linebacker at Penn State back in the 70s.
Oh wow.
And you know how big I am. I was like, don't hit me. And then of course I met Mike, and it's about relationships, it's about knowing
Yeah.
these people, and just it's always good to have a face behind that bottle, and I just appreciate that. I've never met anybody from Andeluna yet, but if they hear me,
Yes, yeah.
I'm ready for
We're
a
here.
trip.
We're here.
So Argentina, sure.
We'll
Here I
take the
come.
first ticket, so.
So on the Gifford, like I said, all Merlot, which is really cool because you don't always find like that 100% varietal, and it's all estate as well. So
This is so right away. One thing I do to get alcohol off a wine is I will take like a really big sniff with my eyes wide open, because I know if they start to like sting or water, maybe there's probably a decent amount of alcohol in there. So I think this wine's a good wine to start to experiment with picking up alcohol in wine.
definitely, yeah. And very often you'll find that in Zinfandels as well.
Yes.
Zinfandels
Yeah.
have a tendency to just shoot up
Yeah.
in alcohol very easily.
Yep.
And this has a little bit of alcohol up on front. I mean, it's 15.7, so it's up there really for wine. But as you kind of taste it, I think it just dissipates, and it's
Yep.
very well integrated.
Yep.
So it doesn't really
It
burn
is,
your
yep.
mouth or anything
The
like that.
fruit is still there.
Mhm.
The wine is still there.
There's a fruit component, but to me it's got a little bit more earthiness to it.
Yeah,
It's
this
got
is.
a little notion of like that terroir.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, like this is a great expression of Walla Walla
It is.
Merlot. Like this
It
is
is.
it.
And just in case
So
you're
the
ever
price
looking for
killer.
them, they're on State Line Road, which is the road dividing Oregon and Washington, and they are on the Washington side of things. So, this is just fantastic, and it's got some oakiness a little bit, which brings a little spice,
Yeah,
like
a little more to the wine,
oak,
really, yeah.
that oak flavor. But it also has some really nice fruit, and it's got a little bit of that tobacco, I think.
Yeah.
A little bit of a like a dusty
Coconut thing. going
coconut,
on.
yeah, and then a little bit of like the dusty kind of component,
Yeah.
which I
It's-
like
it's-
in my wines.
Crowd-pleasing wine, in my opinion. I think that if you were to, again, bring this, I say again, but there's always that wine in the lineup that is just a great party wine, and I think this is the one that you could bring and everyone would be like, dude,
Yeah.
this is awesome.
And it's got
Because
some
I've
nice,
done it before.
nice Polish tannins,
Yeah, oh yeah.
and
Yeah, it drinks smooth.
and it's got like a nice finish, and I think it'll stand to like a steak or something like that too.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
It's got some grip to it.
Yeah.
So
Something peppered too, I think would it might elevate the alcohol a little bit, but I think
Mhm.
the pepper would bring out the fruit in this wine. So yeah.
So it's not too
Yep.
boozy,
No.
Thinking about hot, but so hopefully that gave you like a few ideas on
Yeah.
wine terms and kind of how to look like you know what you're doing. By swirling, by looking, smelling, tasting, just putting that air, spitting if you want to.
Yeah.
Clinging too. I mean,
Oh yes.
cheers.
Cheers.
I mean that is
You
totally.
have to look your partner in
Yeah,
the
I
eyes.
mean just like slow dancing. Just, so.
Well, I kind of look over.
Oh, come on. But yeah, it is. It's a tradition. It's like we don't really know where it came from, to be honest.
Yeah,
But I
there's
remember
something
like.
about actually, listen, medieval lady here.
Okay.
Back when dragons were, I mean, they're still real. But anyway, it's
So are
poisoned.
unicorns.
They tried to, did that. So, if it spilled over or something, you knew that your drink wasn't poisoned.
Oh,
So,
There's plenty of
honestly,
stories
it's still
like that.
pretty applicable today.
there's plenty
You
of
never know.
stories.
I think
Actually,
it's true.
speaking of like medieval times,
Yeah, oh.
when I was a kid, so I never liked milk. So by the time I could
Right, you
actually,
grew up in the medieval times, I forgot.
True. I mean, I don't show it, but I'm pretty old. And by the time I could say no to milk, I never had it again.
Yeah, that's great.
And so I remember, being in France and actually having wine with dinner. I mean, all I had to do was ask. right?
Yeah.
And usually it was like a little bit of wine and some water. And turns out, back when I was in college, I found out how that came about, and that was medieval times.
Ah.
And it was a notion of rank in society.
If you could have
So
wine
if you were
with
like
your
a
meal?
servant, you would have just a tiny bit of wine, or a damsel, like a young lady, you would have just a little bit of wine with a lot of water. And as you were kind of increasing in society, all the way up to like a knight or a king or a prince, then you would go on like to full wine.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm
And
gonna
so
use that on my own
growing up-
children someday.
You know, growing up, I never thought anything about it. I was just happy to have wine, you know. Much better than milk. I'll tell
Yeah.
you that.
Well.
But then I found out later on how that came about.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a piece of history I didn't know.
You know, and to this day, like once in a while, if I have just a little bit of red wine, it's super refreshing. You put that little bit of red wine with some water, and
Brings
then like
back
some
memories, does
brings
it?
back memories, and some ice cubes, and you drink that. It's so refreshing. You have no idea.
Oh.
You should try it.
I should. I still have my Renaissance outfits. So.
Yeah, I never tried that with the Renaissance outfit, but you know, everybody's got their
Is
own
that
thing.
TMI?
Yes.
I don't know.
So,
My mom's hand sews that thing, so it's cool. Anyway,
and so the last thing I want to say, you know, if everything fails and you're kind of like, you know, you're stuck, so you're with people who drink wine, and you're like, you know, putting your nose in there and you just don't get anything, you're like,
it smells like this is a red.
you know, you're like, this is a red.
This is
yeah,
red.
This is red. You can always say, you know, oh, that's actually very interesting.
Yes, that's my
And if you don't know how to describe it, it's like, you know, it's
Interesting.
so complex.
God, it's just.
It's got this notion of terroir. I mean, if you don't know what terroir is, it's like everything that encompasses the area where the wine is made. So I mean, it could be anything,
Yeah,
right? It could be the
literally
soil,
just-
it could
yeah.
be the plants that grow around, what people are eating there, you know, what kind of tobacco they chew. I don't know. I mean, it's like this is all notion
The
of
plants
terroir.
that are growing
The
next door.
climate
yeah.
and you know what kind of flowers grow there. I mean,
Yeah.
but terroir is always like a good thing to get out of it. You know, it's like, oh, this is very interesting. I can totally get the terroir from this wine.
And there you go. You sound like an expert.
And all of a sudden people are like, we'll invite you again, or we can open the good bottles around you.
You
So-
think we studied, but really,
Really,
we just say that over
Yeah.
and over again.
I just do a lot of homework at home.
Yeah.
That's all. So,
Yep. So anyway, yeah, this is fun, and I hope you all learned something. Y'all are gonna sound like pros the next time you come in. So, as a quick reminder, again, the bottles are 15% off if you buy all 4 at once, and then 10% off individually.
and really, why wouldn't you buy all 4 at once?
I know, yeah, and practice. There's a bunch of tasting sheets you can
Yeah.
download online and
This
just
is,
run through them with the bottles.
This is Saturday, 98-degree weather. This is Sunday, 78.
Yes.
So there you go, you got the weekend covered.
You got your whole weekend covered.
See?
You broke it down for you.
That's all I gotta
That's
say.
why we go. That's why we bring them in.
Oh.
As our motto goes, life is too short to drink bad wine.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. I do, yeah. I know a fair amount about fine food and beverage. This is a white.
Okay.
Oaky Afterbirth. Rubber hose. Cottage cheese. Celery.
Okay.